This is Dr. Heiniger from North Carolina. I'm Denny Wildman, and we're at the field research plots up at Penn State University. He was gracious enough to come up for today and look at plots with some tools that both two companies manufacture, the Stoller Group and AgriEnergy. AgriEnergy has a very unique biological product that I located about 4 years ago, and last winter in January I called Doc and I said, hello, I'm Denny Wildman. You remember me?
As if you had to introduce. Your voice is distinctive.
And he said, yeah, I remember you. And I asked him 5 distinct questions, had to do with what's going on with plants recovering fertility. Is there something going on in the soil maybe that we're starting to become aware of? And then I told him a story of finding SP1 produced by AgriEnergy out in Illinois. And I asked him if he'd like to try some. And he said he would. So, Doc, would you like to talk about what you've seen this year in that plot?
You know, one of the things we talked about was how our soil health has declined. Our soils are compacting. We're seeing more and more problems with getting nutrient uptake into these crops. And, of course, that's plaguing us down in North Carolina as it is across the country here. So when you talked about some new approaches, particularly some products that had a potential for improving soil tilth and health-wise, very interested there in that meat. So we tried some SP1 this year in some of our plots, and I've been very impressed. You came down and we actually dug up some roots and took a look at those, and it struck me both the difference in the granular texture of the soil, the tilth of the soil, as well as the mucilage. We mentioned that as we looked at the roots around where the SP1 treatment had been applied, the amount of slickness there was around the roots and in that soil itself, something that indeed I've been looking for a while, to try to see if we can improve that soil-plant root interface to the point where that plant root's doing a better job of taking up nutrients. So since then, by the way, we've seen some real differences in ear size and plant growth there. I'm very excited about those plots. We've had plenty of rain in North Carolina, and usually when that happens, our plants turn yellow. Those plots have stayed green because, of course, they're continuing to take in nutrients and oxygen despite saturated or heavy moisture in those soils. So some very impressive results there just from looking at the root systems, the soil. So much so that in my meetings this summer, as we looked at field days, I've been talking to growers about this and the root systems and how root systems have to be improved if we're going to, as I say, defend against the weather that we're seeing. This extremes from rain to dry back into very rainy situations. So indeed, there's been some real interesting things. I'm looking forward to harvest, by the way.
What do you think along the lines of taking a crop like corn, utilizing materials like SP1 and MST tools from the AgriEnergy group to improve soil tilth? And how many people ever talk about corn improving soil structure in North Carolina?
Well, we don't talk about it very much because, of course, it's almost the undiscovered country when you talk about roots and soil interface down there. It's hard to see, hard to measure, so people many times don't like to talk about that. But it's become more and more important, particularly in these, whether you think about climate change or whatever it is that's driving these heavy rainfall events, these periods where we see excessive rain that's unusual. Our only defense is that root system, being able to continue to function and supply that crop with nutrients. So I've been excited. I've been excited to be here today to see the impact of SP1 because I can see it in my plots. It's interesting to look at Dr. Orslick's plots here at Penn State and see the very same thing. Of course, he's got 2 years and the carryover effect of that SP1 in improving nutrient uptake in a second year. That was very impressive this afternoon as we looked at that.
Going along a little farther on my question, what do you think a grower would think if we coined the word, use corn and the technology AgriEnergy developed as in SP1, to improve soil structure, soil health, where you're telling the grower that he can utilize corn to improve his soil structure, and maybe look at his cover crops because they're there for such a short period of time, and generally and they're growing in many areas where soil temperature, soil moisture, the sunlight is not the same. So you're looking at corn to improve your soil health, and your cover crop to keep your soil in place, continue that continual development, which is actually accelerating at a slower rate. What do you think growers would say to grow corn, use SP1 to improve your soil structure and tilth?
Yeah,
would they laugh at you?
They probably would have a chuckle at least, because we think of corn as something that's very hard on the soils. I heard Fred Belo talk last week about corn, following corn, and how that has a continuing negative effect on the succeeding crop of having corn in that rotation. We think of corn as a crop that's tough on our soils, so they'll probably have a chuckle about that. But indeed, the real issue is how much roots we develop under a corn crop. It's the problem. Oftentimes our root systems are basically flat. A pancake root is what we describe it in North Carolina. You got some roots around about the 6-inch diameter around that stalk, and that's it. You don't have much more development. We've seen in our plots where we're using SPO, you've got roots going down, you've got roots expanded off that 6-inch diameter, and that is improving soil health. You're actually contributing to the health of the soil then with a corn crop. But indeed, I think that's a different concept than many have talked about, and the possibility of doing that would be very exciting.
In the 1 year you've worked with me in your black soils there at the research farm in Plymouth, we've started to notice a difference in granulation where we've used SP1, and you didn't apply any fertilizer with it. You had your normal fertility program, but we didn't have a pop-up with it. We had some micronutrients from the Stoller group applied with it that looks, where we looked at, both the SP1 alone looked good. When we took the Stoller micronutrients and added to it, we had a greater impact. So as Dean Crane would say, the biological needs food, and evidently what we supplied it with, we definitely had an excellent response so far.
Well, that's exactly right. You see more granulated. That was the stunning thing, just pulling up the plant. We saw how much easier that plant was to remove than soil, because the soil was much more granulated and had more tilth to it. Whereas that plant where we didn't have the SP1, you literally had to dig it or work it out of the ground, because that ground was hard and compacted and slicked up against that root system. Whereas here you had granulation, you had this slicky mucilage off those root systems. So when you grabbed that soil, you had a black film on your hand as you worked that soil from that mucilage on those roots. It is a different interface that we provide. You're exactly right. You've got to build a foundation. The soil is that foundation. You've got to have a soil that contributes air and nutrients and water to that crop. Then you can supply the nutrients, the hormones, or the other things that plant needs to take up to really do the job of putting the kernels and the ears on there.
When we were together and looking at your plots, it was noticeable to both of us that the corn that had the SP1 applied in the in-furrow program had a greater moisture content around the base of the stalk and down into the root system. Mm-hmm. And is that the last time you looked?
Oh, it continues to improve. One of the things that I've noted, we've had 16, 17 inches of rain down in North Carolina, in some areas flooding and other things going on. But you go out to those plots where we've used the SP1 in a 4-row plot, that plot is drained, that soil dries off quickly, and so that water moves down and infiltrates, versus plots right beside it where we're seeing pooling and ponding between the rows a little bit longer in this. So indeed, that just the nature of what's going on there is improving, and you can tell it right to the row.
The soil moisture balance there is much better where we've used the SP1 for 1 year.
Yeah, and I think that's some of what's happened here with Dr. Orslick on this, where they've had a lot of rain here at this farm as well. You see that corn flourish because it has a chance to to drain better, take up those nutrients better, and you see that greenness 2 years in a row, despite the fact he couldn't get nitrogen on. That corn looks like it's had plenty of nitrogen there.
It did look like where we had applied SP1 2 years in a row, it did look like the crop had a greater abundance of nitrogen than where we did not have it for 2 years in a row. It was impressive.
It's impressive indeed, and I definitely want to try that in North Carolina as well, see how we can build that soil over time.
Well, with that, I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Heiniger for making the 7-hour trip up to see the work that's going on with Dr. Orslick at Penn State. And furthermore, Dr. Heiniger has been gracious enough to do some temperature probes and moisture probes. We're going to take a look and see if we're elevating the availability of certain nutrients in that zone area where the roots have been developing along with the use of SP1, meaning greater amount of phosphorus availability and potassium availability, which we tend to find about 85% of the time in the work that I've been doing here in the East. And so we're going to continue to work on this, and thank you.